Hey everyone, happy Friday. It's good to be live with you. Well, shocking details from a Freedom of Information Act request reveal that the CDC has been monitoring millions of Americans' moves, intricate details of their moves against Americans' will without them knowing over the course of the pandemic. What is the CDC using this information for? And just how much more are we being monitored without our knowing? So we're going to get into what was revealed in this bombshell report, what Senator Ron Johnson is doing about it. And also, I wanted to just highlight a couple other interesting news items. Turns out one of the new needles is now being banned from anyone who's under 18. You're not supposed to take this needle. So that's interesting. As well as I want to talk about the blackmailing of Madison Cawthorn, one of our American congressmen, after he revealed some things that were not supposed to be revealed. Okay, so let's look at this. So here's the deal, guys. And it's Ask Me Anything Friday, guys. We're not doing truth bombs again. Jenny has got some stuff going on. She can't make it anyway. So just ask me anything. I'm going to try to do a lot of comments. So just write in the comments and I will answer your questions. But let's get into what's going on. Secret monitoring of millions of Americans. So the Motherboard news publication, a part of Vice.com, filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the CDC, and the document that they got back showed that the CDC spent $420,000 for a year's worth of detailed cell phone data that shows the exact moves of at least 20 million Americans every day. They compared that to 2019 movements, and they are analyzing our lives in regards allegedly to this pandemic, but they're analyzing a lot more than just the pandemic, as we'll find out. Okay, before I dive deep, shout out to the sponsor of my coverage, which is Health with Ivory. Check this out. Studies have revealed that our appearances affect our mental health. The anti-aging industry has tried to capitalize on that for decades. Unfortunately, many of the anti-aging products out there fall short. This is because most of the serums and supplements out there don't target the source of the problem. This is why I am such a huge fan of multi-collagen. Multi-collagen works to quickly restore youthfulness back to our skin. It helps by combating loose skin and wrinkles, and it does this quicker and more effectively than most things out there. Imagine how good your skin will look this summer when you take it. If you want to look and feel your best, grab some multi-collagen today. Get up to 51% off for the next 24 hours by clicking that link down in my description, healthwithivory.com. My mom uses this exact brand and loves it too. My mom's always been a health nut. So when I showed this brand to her, she was like, oh my gosh. So Health with Ivory, ageless multi-collagen, fantastic stuff. I like to put it in my coffee and smoothies and sometimes in my milk and cereal. Okay, so get this, Vice.com. Let me just bring up the article so that YouTube doesn't come after me and say that I'm making things up. Okay, so Vice published this bombshell report. CDC tracked millions of phones to see if Americans followed the lockdown orders, but they tracked more things than that. Apparently, they're looking at things like our violent activity. Why would they be doing that? So we don't even realize how advanced cell phone tracking data is right now. In just the past handful of years, the information that can be remotely obtained from our cell phones, you can actually track a person's movement within feet of where this cell phone is moving. So technology is advancing sometimes more than we realize it's advancing. And now technology on the movement of this phone is in the hands of federal health officials of all people. So here are the details from this article. So they tracked at least 20 million active cell phone users per day across the U.S. They had special interest in the Navajo Nation, the largest Native American nation in the U.S. By the way, that nation is located in the northeast corner of Arizona, northwest corner of New Mexico, and a little bit of the southeast corner of Utah. Big Indian nation, and the CDC wanted to see exactly what these people were doing. Why is this nation a test subject of the U.S. federal health officials without their knowledge? Gosh, I guess it wouldn't be the first time they secretly tested people without them knowing, would it? All right, so that is why a lot of minorities don't want to get these needles, because America has a dark history of doing weird stuff to people without them knowing it. Anyway, so it goes on to say that they took special interest in certain locations, including visits to schools. So they tracked millions of Americans in their visits to schools, their visits to places where they got the needle in the arm, their visits to places of worship, their visits to grocery stores. It also monitored acts of violence, and it also monitored movements around lockdown orders. They wanted to see how effective these lockdown orders were. Like if there's a curfew in place, like Miami decided to do, tell people you can't go out past 8 p.m. And is that being effective? Compared it to 2019, the data was purchased from a group called SafeGraph, which collects all our cell phone movements. This group was previously exposed for selling location data that showed who was visiting Planned Parenthood. That's pretty creepy. So you do a secret visit to Planned Parenthood, that's not secret. SafeGraph has all the data, and they have sold it to people who want to collect who's going to Planned Parenthood. So one of the original funders of SafeGraph, this was just recently exposed, that SafeGraph was harvesting cell phone data in regards to visits to Planned Parenthood, selling it to other groups. And once this was exposed this week, SafeGraph banned the use of data for analyzing protests, because turns out it wasn't just Planned Parenthood. It says here, quote, this is something which multiple researchers have already looked at. Apparently, people have been buying data from SafeGraph in regards to visits to large protests. We have had an immense number of giant protests over the course of the pandemic. In regards, both leftists and right-wing people have been going out en masse. Leftists because they think that cops are killing Black people. Right-wingers because they feel that our elections are no longer, reliable, or they feel that their liberties have been stripped away because there's big lockdowns in place. So anyway, now groups are actually purchasing this data from SafeGraph. On Wednesday of this week, SafeGraph banned the use of this data for analyzing protests, but people who've already purchased that data, they have it and they're looking at it, and the CDC is one of the groups who has that data. One of the original funders of SafeGraph has now announced he is selling his shares and donating to Planned Parenthood. His name is Ari Trastall. So now that he's been called out, he's like, oh, my bad. I'm sorry for stalking people who are going to get abortions. I'm going to now go fund Planned Parenthood instead. So this sort of cell phone movement data, it was used by True the Vote to analyze election issues. That big film that is out this week, the Mules movie that's already being censored everywhere. You guys probably want to check it out. They used, so the election researchers used the same cell phone data, and they were actually able, this data is so accurate now, like I said, within feet of your cell phone, they're able to tell basically who each phone belongs to. And so they're able to identify who these people were who were trafficking. I'm using words you're not supposed to say on YouTube. Votes. They were trafficking this stuff and compromising the election. So it's really interesting what you can do with this cell phone data. And someone said turn off your location services, but that's not going to really do anything. I think if you turn off your entire phone, they can't track you. But if you have the phone on, even if it's a flip phone, they can still track you. So Wednesday of this week, they banned the use of this data in analyzing protests. Of course, people who attended January 6th, they're probably really concerned about that, right? Because our feds have decided to go arrest innocent people who went to January 6th, even though January 6th was only in, for most people, it was just about going and supporting their president. But sadly, it's been twisted in a way to allow for the arresting of innocent people. So for people who attended that protest, it's concerning. And for protests going forward, it's concerning. Like, are our feds going to be purchasing cell phone data to analyze us? Honestly, they probably already have, right? Because you don't know what you don't know about how they are tracking you. And Edward Snowden, when he blew the whistle on the NSA, he tried to let people know this, that you guys, you are being intensely tracked against your will, basically. And you need to get active and push your legislators to ban this sort of tracking. Otherwise, there's going to come a point in history where our leaders are going to say there's an emergency where we need to control everyone, and they'll have the details from tracking us to be able to control us. This is something Edward Snowden said, about a decade ago. So here we are learning how much we're being tracked. 20 million people a day tracked by the CDC against our will, just revealed in a Freedom of Information Act request filing. Okay, so this article talks about the beginning with May 2022 release. SafeGraph patterns data cannot be used to analyze, study, or report on protests or social demonstrations. This is inclusive of the May 2022 release and applies to all subsequent releases of SafeGraph patterns. So SafeGraph will no longer, they announced they will no longer be releasing data surrounding protest locations. Also, they said that on Thursday, I guess that's yesterday, Motherboard reported that a second location data firm called Placer.ai, they have freely accessible heat maps that showed approximately where people who visited Planned Parenthood lived. Whoa. Where people who visited Planned Parenthood lived. The company also removed Planned Parenthood data from public search after Motherboard reached out for comment based on heat maps. This is very strange. So they also said SafeGraph wrote in a blog post in April of 2020, so 2 years ago, that, quote, to play our part in the fight against the illness, health crisis, and its devastating impact on the global economy, we decided to expand our program further, making our foot traffic data free for nonprofit organizations and government agencies at the local, state, and federal level. So early on in the pandemic, they were allowing government officials to use this very intricate details about our personal lives for free. That's interesting. I wonder how long it was free, because the CDC apparently paid $420,000 in our tax dollars to track us without us knowing. But the fact that data was published to be free, promoted to be free to local, state, and federal officials, I'm just wondering how many of our government authorities are tracking us. Your local mayor could be tracking you for free if he happened to get the word from SafeGraph that he could do that. Also, they said Google banned SafeGraph from its Google Play Store in June. This means that any app developer using SafeGraph code had to remove it from their app or face having their app removed from the App Store. So apparently, apps have been buying this SafeGraph data and tracking the every move of the app user, and Google Play is apparently trying to cut back on that. This is very interesting. So many things that I was not aware of. Were you guys? This is quite interesting. Okay, I'm going to check out some of your comments now. And here we have a super chat from Michael. Thank you, Michael. You said DFW cops indicted for George Floyd protest story. Oh, is that so? I am not familiar. I'm going to have to look into that. I do not have the latest in that. Thanks for all the Ivory Hecker comments. Syracuse, yes, I'm a Syracuse grad. Proud to have graduated from Syracuse. Thank you. Jenny out again. I know. It's like, what's going on? I've got to figure out truth bombs. But these are wild times in a lot of people's lives. So I want to. I know you guys, truth bombs. I want to shout out. The fact that incidents of unruly passengers on airlines have dropped immensely, a new report finds. So turns out that there were about 1.9 incidents per 10,000 passengers of unruly passengers on airlines, pretty consistently in the pandemic. And then, it was 4.4 incidents, and ever since the mask mandate has been taken down, now it's down to 1.9 incidents. So it's dropped by like 1/3, or it's 1/3 of what it was. So a lot less unruly passengers. People were acting very unruly. It sounds like due to the pandemic. So I have that article as well. From the Washington Post, quote, unruly airline passengers complaints dipped after mask ruling was voided. I wonder if that's why some of the stewardesses started crying once the mask mandate was over. They're like, thank God we hated enforcing this. Well, you guys shouldn't have enforced it then. Just kind of let people be free. But anyway, I forgot to mention that Senator Ron Johnson has written... Oh, crap. I just got replay. Okay, so Senator Ron Johnson has written a letter to CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. I want to show you that as well. He is calling her out for tracking Americans against their will. I have this letter linked down below. It is written yesterday, Cinco de Mayo, and he says, Dear Director Walensky, a recent report revealed that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention spent at least $420,000 to purchase location data from at least 20 million active cell phone users per day in an effort to assist the agency in monitoring Americans during the pandemic. And so he's asking why. He has some questions for her. To better understand the CDC's purchase of the use of location data, I request your agency provide the following information no later than May 19th. Was CDC's use of location data the only mechanism it employed to monitor Americans during the pandemic? That's an interesting question, because a lot of Americans have theories right now that they may be getting monitored more than they realize, especially when you have creepy people from the World Economic Forum saying that now you're going to be monitored under your skin. I had a report on that last week that got censored for some reason. But it shows it's still on my YouTube, but YouTube says they're not letting anyone see my report, which is entitled Watch This Man Closely. Yuval Noah Harari is the man from World Economic Forum who has said in countless interviews that this pandemic will be known as a time in history when monitoring went from above the skin to below the skin. And people are like, what do you mean by that? And then we look back at a World Economic Forum meeting, YouTube video from that meeting published on World Economic Forum's official YouTube, 2018, has the leader, the CEO of one of the top needle companies, talking about how glad he was that the FDA had recently approved new technology that involved a chip that goes inside of your medicine. When you take the medicine, the chip is then installed in you. He straight up talks about this. The leader of the Phi Needle Company, I don't want to say any trigger words here, but it's on the World Economic Forum's YouTube to this day. I don't think they've taken it down. And he's saying this is really exciting in regards to compliance. We can see whether they've really taken that medicine or if they just said they did. And then you look at that today and you're like, what is going on? And then you find out the CDC has been tracking millions of Americans against their will every day during the pandemic without us knowing, based on cell phone movements. And Ron Johnson is saying, is that the only way you've been tracking us, CDC? Because just knowing that you've been tracking us this way without our knowledge makes us think, how many other ways are you tracking us against our knowledge? Especially when we hear about this new medicine tracking technology where the chip is inside you, straight up talked about very publicly by the CEO of this needle company. And average Americans think this is a conspiracy theory. It's not whatsoever. There's actually studies on this tracking technology, very, very prevalently out there, that we can't really showcase because we get censored when we do. But Ron Johnson's asking the right questions. His number 2 question: who at CDC approved the use and subsequent purchase of location data? Question number 3: what companies supply CDC with location data? For each company, indicate the years in which the data was provided to CDC and the cost of the data. So that's good to know that Ron Johnson is trying to get those answers. Will he get those answers? He provided a deadline for Rochelle Walensky. What's going to happen if she doesn't meet that deadline? Is he going to arrest her? Probably not. So I'm guessing she's probably not going to provide that location data. What do you guys think? It's just been really interesting to actually look at what's going on in the world that my corporate news boss has never assigned me to cover prior. Now that I can dig into true facts that are indeed happening, that never get covered on the news because I don't have to do the national, the corporate news narrative anymore. It's just really interesting what you find. So anyway, there's other interesting updates. So one of the needle companies is now being reported that you are not supposed to get this needle if you are 18 and under. So I have this CNN headline: FDA puts strict limit on Johnson needle. The Food and Drug Administration announced Thursday, that's yesterday, time flies, that it is limiting the emergency use authorization of the Johnson needle for people 18 and older only. And it doesn't look like anyone under 18 was ever authorized to use this needle. There was actually a study. There was an update from the Johnson Needle Company back April 2nd of 2021, just over a year ago. Johnson reported that they had begun needling adolescent participants in an ongoing phase 2A clinical trial of the needle developed by Janssen. Okay, so at that time, so spring of 2021, a year ago, they were sticking those needles in 12-year-olds, people ages 12 to 17. So over the past year, adolescents and teenagers have been studied, and now there's an abrupt update saying, okay, let's not do this anymore. So my question is, what happened to those 12 to 17-year-olds that made you guys say this is not a good thing for people to use if they are teens? Well, the big update is that in this CNN article, they're talking about, well, it turns out that the blood clots are quite common. Things called thrombosis and thrombocytopenia syndrome after receiving the needle. Now, Johnson was the company reported early on to have blood clot issues, and they even suspended emergency use authorization for a matter of weeks in spring 2021 after 2 people got blood clots. As far as I can see, this is a big publicity stunt to move Americans over to getting those RNA needles instead. You know what I'm saying? They don't want you to get the Johnson one. You see, FDA would rather you just get that really new needle technology. At the bottom of this CNN article, it's really interesting because remember, this article is all about do not give anyone under 18 this needle because of blood clot issues. Now, at the bottom, it says overall, the risk of these sorts of clots is extremely rare, about 3 cases for every million doses of the needle administered. The highest rate of this clotting has been in women women aged 30 to 49 years of age. About 8 cases per 1 million doses of the needle administered have been in women in this age group. So this literally makes no sense then, because they are banning this needle for people under 18, but they're reporting that the people most likely to get this reaction from the needle are women aged 30 to 49. So why would you not ban it for women to age 30 to 49? Makes absolutely no sense. And they don't say anything about the rate at which reactions that you don't want happened in teens. So why are you banning it for teens only? It makes no sense. And they also don't talk at all about if you actually search the database that is available through the CDC on what's really happened to people after they get this needle, you find that these clots are insanely common in all of regardless of which needle you get. So why this big publicity stunt only about the Johnson needle? It seems that they just want to steer people clear, especially when you're trying to get all of the children needled up now. Steer people clear of the Johnson technology. We want that super new needle technology instead. So sketchy update in regards to the needle. And acting like Johnson is the only problem needle. So the only needle that is authorized for kids as young as 5 is the Phi needle, the same needle company where the CEO was bragging about that chip technology that can go and track you. Yeah, it's the same company. Straight up. I covered that soundbite in a previous YouTube. In fact, I shared that soundbite on my Instagram, where a lot of corporate news friends or previous friends still stalk my Instagram. And one of them was actually responded to me, was like, I am dumbfounded. Like, a lot of corporate news people are sheltered from these strange high-tech developments that happen in regards to, Americans being tracked through what medicine they're taking. And so I just encourage you, every time you see like a strange alarming update like this, like you see the leader of a needle company bragging on camera about how he can track you with a chip, which those sound bites are out there on World Economic Forum's own YouTube. I encourage you to send that soundbite to your favorite news personality and ask this person, hey, I'm a big fan of your corporate news coverage. Can you look into this new technology about tracking our every move after we take a kind of medicine? Just send that soundbite to the news person. The news person is probably not even aware of it because their news corporation shelters them from weird updates from pharmaceutical companies like this, you see. Because the corporate news faces the foot soldiers of the news corporations, must follow a narrative that is lovey-dovey about pharmaceutical companies. So any creepy updates from these pharmaceutical overlords must be downplayed and not shown to the corporate news foot soldiers. So your favorite corporate news foot soldier, just go send your favorite soundbite to them and ask them to look further into it, because you're such a huge fan of their news coverage and you trust the work they do. They will then likely be seeing that soundbite for the first time. They will likely show it to their boss. It'll likely cause a big ruckus in the newsroom, which will be very good. It'll wake more and more news people up who are asleep in their newsrooms, and we can slowly break out of this sleep that our corporate news industry is under right now. Let's check some comments. Thanks for the super chat, Scott. quote, you should do an interview with Chris Martins on at Peak Prosperity. He's been talking about upcoming crash for 2 years. Ooh, yes, this upcoming crash is quite scary. I think it's happening now. My money is not doing so well, you guys. I don't know about your money. You sent me another one. Thank you so much. Better watch out. They might start calling you the younger, prettier Alex Jones, but then again, he's been proven right a lot lately. Yeah, here's the thing with what I just said. I didn't randomly come up with anything. I didn't jump to a theory about what might happen in the future. I'm telling you what I actually witnessed in this video. I should have had the YouTube video ready. I guess I didn't think I would bring this up, but World Economic Forum YouTube. Look for the CEO. It's honestly it's a long YouTube video, and at the end of the YouTube video, it's just this group of pharmaceutical bosses sitting on a panel discussing new medicine technology. And towards the end of one of the YouTube videos from 2018, he says, yeah, it's really exciting because just recently FDA approved this new chip technology. And if you look it up, there's studies out there which likely led up to the FDA approval of this new chip technology. So anyway, so I'm a little different than Alex Jones. I understand Alex Jones sometimes just throws out big theories without, proof or whatever, which would be called a conspiracy theory. But I'm just telling you what's already out there. This isn't a theory. No, this is literally out there. So, but with that being said, I think that theorizing is a wonderful thing. I think more and more people should theorize about what's going on. We should all be trying to figure that out, right? And what people do right now, people who want you to stay in the hypnosis of the current narrative and not think for yourself, what they do is bully others by calling them conspiracy theorists, as if conspiracy theorist is a bad term. But it's not. It's actually a good term to it's a good thing to theorize about who might be conspiring right now, because we are witnessing unprecedented times in history, and obviously there have been powerful groups who have been conspiring. So to theorize about who is conspiring and why is a good thing. I wanted to talk to you guys about Madison Cawthorn. There's this big drama. Apparently someone released an embarrassing video of Madison Cawthorn, and he's calling it out as blackmail. Let me just show you Madison Cawthorn's tweet. There's all kinds of gossip articles about Madison Cawthorn, and he is putting this tweet out. A new hit against me just dropped years ago. In this video, I was being crass with a friend, trying to be funny. We were acting foolish and joking. That's it. I am not backing down. I told you there would be a drip drip campaign. Blackmail won't win. We will. So I like his attitude. I just think it's really interesting that it was just a few weeks ago that a podcaster dared to ask him whether Congress in real life 2022 is any bit similar to House of Cards. And he's like, absolutely. And then he went on to basically say that there's cocaine-fueled sex orgies in Congress, and that he has been invited to, quote, sexual gatherings by members of Congress. And he realized he was being invited to an orgy, and he was like, no, thank you, I don't want to go. And he said these things. And he's like, yeah, these invites were coming from people that I looked up to. He said, which what he just did in saying that on that podcast is call out fellow Republicans in Congress. So Kevin McCarthy comes for Madison Cawthorn's throat. He's like, how dare you, Madison? That's not, that's horrible for you to say. And it was like, well, Kevin McCarthy must be one of the guilty ones. But when you think about how many members of Congress are compromised, they make all these promises, then they get to Washington and don't fulfill their promises. It's like, why didn't they fulfill their promises? Something must have come in the middle to keep this representative from their constituents. And I wonder if it was some sort of blackmail technique. Like if you invite someone to a compromising orgy and they, God forbid, get filmed doing something weird at one of these orgies, then you can hold that against them for the rest of their life, right? Like, well, you better do what we want in Congress rather than what your constituents want in Congress, or we're going to release this tape, right? So anyway, Madison Cawthorn says that he said, heck no, screw that. I'm not even going to show up to your orgy. And by shouting out the fact that other members of Congress were doing orgies, he ended up causing other members of Congress to hate him. And then what do you know, a few weeks later, after he exposed members of Congress for their orgies, he gets blackmailed himself. And someone releases this old tape of him apparently like naked in some sort of, I don't even know, I haven't watched the video, but I've seen it described in articles. And he's like, screw this, you guys are blackmailing me because I outed you for your orgies. And he's like, I knew this would happen. And I think one thing that Trump's presidency did is pave the way for a lot of America First sort of representatives, because what people watched with Trump is Trump got ripped apart like never before. The hell that Trump was dragged through as president, and he didn't back down, and his constituents were right with him. I think that it empowered people like Madison Cawthorn to say, well, if Trump can stand firm against all this hell, so can I, and maybe my constituents will stick with me as long as I stick with them. And it seems to be what Madison Cawthorn is doing here. He's listening to his constituents' frustration in this moment and sticking with them rather than sticking with the compromised swamp, desires. And so he's getting ripped apart because of it. And he's like, I'm not even surprised. So, this Reuters article says nude video latest scandal turning Republicans against U.S. Representative Cawthorn. I guess some of his poll numbers have gone down a little bit, this article says, since this video of him was released. But he's like, this was his response to that, saying that he's not backing down. He's never gonna, no matter how much people try to drag him through the mud, he's sticking with his constituents, he said. And he is up for re-election in November as well. Other than that, 20 attorney generals across America are going after this new DHS Disinformation Governance Board, saying that it's unconstitutional, basically, for the DHS to be regulating our speech. And that's good to see that attorneys general across America are fighting back against a disinformation governance board. But it's still not been completely clear how our government is going to govern disinformation, right? Alejandro Mayorkas says, I'm just going to be governing the disinformation from cartels and stuff. That's all. Cartels who are trying to convince more migrants to come up across the border. We're just going to be governing their disinformation. Well, how exactly are you going to be governing their disinformation? Are you going to be censoring them directly? I think what we're getting here is we have to read between the lines that DHS is saying, I think DHS is trying to say that they are indeed collaborating directly with these big tech companies to censor. And I wish that our representatives, like Senator Johnson, Senator Rand Paul, would have been more direct with them about, like, dude, can you read between the lines there here about how you are going to govern disinformation? Because you're not arresting the people who are spreading disinformation. You're just censoring it out, right? And we keep hearing from people who are pro-censorship saying that it is okay for a big tech corporation to censor because they're a private company. But are they really completely private, or are they working directly with government agencies? DHS talks repeatedly on its website about its private partnerships. in regards to disinformation, mitigating disinformation, working with private partners to do so. I think we have to realize that these big tech corporations are not working alone. I think what we have in America right now is pretty similar to what China's been doing, censoring free speech, which is, by the way, a violation, direct violation of the First Amendment of our Constitution right now. And so our feds are never going to come out and directly admit to violating the First Amendment. But we had Jen Psaki last summer say, yeah, we're working with Facebook. Whenever we see something we don't like, we send it to Facebook so Facebook can censor it. You know, Psaki said that. I'm going to play. I actually still have that soundbite available. Here it is.
In terms of actions, Alex, that we have taken, or we're working to take, I should say, from the federal government, we've increased disinformation research and tracking within the Surgeon General's office. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation.
There you go. They flag it for Facebook. They have a nice little connection with Facebook, and Facebook zapped it out. So that's against the First Amendment. And not too many people seem to care. What a time to be alive. It's part of why I left the corporate news, is my bosses not only didn't care about these First Amendment violations, but they were supporting it and said, how dare you criticize this, Ivory? How dare you criticize the censorship of free speech in our country? What's up, guys? I'm looking at your comments. Big tech making backdoor deals with the feds. Exactly. Oh yeah, apparently they're officially passing the baton on the new press secretary, and Jen Psaki is bidding adieu, and she's going to go back to being a corporate news person like she used to be. And just like Kayleigh McEnany did, she left the White House and went on to do Fox News. Jen Psaki's doing MSNBC, I think, right? I didn't totally keep track of that. Propaganda doesn't work if it's not something you don't agree with. All right. UN. Don't respect sovereignty. They don't respect sovereignty. Ministry of Misinformation. I think you can get a lot of volunteers. Ministry of Misinformation. You know what? We just need to chill on the whole misinformation. The words misinformation and disinformation were just recently invented. And those are forms of speech that are protected by our First Amendment. Our First Amendment doesn't say anything about misinformation and disinformation. And none of the exceptions to the First Amendment do. There are exceptions to the First Amendment for things like libel and incitement of violence and things, but misinformation and disinformation are protected by the First Amendment. And you have to be willing to have people, allow people to be misinformed in order to protect free speech. Of course, in an ideal world, we'd love for everyone to understand and not misunderstand. But if you're trying to force understanding on people by deleting any other form of information, then you strip people of their free speech. Okay. So, yeah. I was going to bring up Hitler again because that's just what happened. He wanted people to understand his mind. Hitler wanted people to think like him. Hitler wanted people to think that the Nazi way was the best way and that all Jews sucked. So if he could strip the understanding of any other way from people, maybe everyone could agree with Hitler. That's what he tried to do. And censored free speech big time, starting in 1933. Free speech was not restored until the end of World War II. And a lot of people were not even aware of the murder of 6 million Jews because that information was censored out. Okay. So free speech is a must, and we have creepy government officials and big tech overlords right now. With that being said, I gotta run. I'm gonna be filming a really interesting interview this evening that I'll try to get out to you guys tomorrow. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you guys later.